You can support this podcast at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And on this episode, her high school newspaper expose on rumors about a teacher resulted in backlash. Years later, a reporter reinvestigates the claims their science teacher was a predator. We'll talk about the podcast Adults in the Room from KUOW. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband and love of my life, Kevin Flynn. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
Although, you're not the love of my life when he's sitting right here, are you?
Oh, you mean the dog is here?
He's right here with us on the bench.
And I can't sit because he's in my spot.
That's right. Also with us, private investigator, certified pet detective, resident cat lady, and author of the Piper Green series of cozy mysteries, Laura Bricker. Hi, Laura.
Hey, Rebecca.
And finally, all the way from Valencia, Spain, author of the City Trilogy, host of Rip Current, More Like Ancient Phalians, and the podcast soon to be a major motion picture, Strange Arrivals. Toby Ball. Que pasa, Toby?
Hey, Rebecca.
So, Kevin, this is Thursday's program.
It is.
What's coming up in the future on this show?
So next week on Monday, we're going to talk about the new podcast from Serial Productions of the New York Times. It's called The Idiot. And then on Thursday, a week from today, we'll talk about the Netflix documentary series, The Predator of Seville.
All right.
As in Spain, right, Toby?
I'll be able to give you a lot of insight into that one, I'm sure.
Yeah, you won't even need the subtitles because you're bilingual now.
That's right.
That's exactly right.
Will you be drinking your giant glass of Valencia orange juice while you watch that documentary?
Yeah, just straight out of the, I don't even know what they call those things.
The juicer?
They look like milk cartons, but they actually have like preservative insides, I guess, because that's what they put the milk in.
Yeah.
Like when you go to get milk or orange juice or like all these other things that you'd expect to be in the refrigerator aisle in the U.S., they're just in the normal aisle, but they're in these like cool little cartons that keep them fresh.
Yeah, they have that in the Caribbean too. Every time we go, I'm like, oh, warm milk.
Yeah.
Amazing. So, Toby, speaking of you,
yes,
one thing I know about you is that you don't listen to any of the things that you're in or that you make. And I learned this about you during a live show many years ago, where when we started the business section and started playing the business section music, you literally said, "What is this music?"
Yep.
And I'm like, I've played this music 1,000 times. Did you know, as we mentioned in the last episode, had you heard that there is a new theme song for your book club podcast on Patreon, The Deep Dive?
I've heard rumors.
Okay. So what was it that Toby asked for? He said would be cool.
Well, we played a clip for him. He was talking about like how he wanted a rockin' out version of a Crime Writers On theme song.
Like a metal version?
Yeah, and explained that like we did put one together. We took the original stuff. We just ran the saxophone through a guitar distortion pedal or whatever. And it was the theme song to Deep Dive for many years. And it included, my favorite little thing was that it had like that... all the outtakes from King Lear that you hear in I Am the Walrus, because it seemed pretty... That one was just for me. Anyway, since we kind of threw it out there about Toby wanting an Iron Maiden theme.
Yes.
Well, Jeff Brumley, who is a longtime friend of the show, he put something together. And other folks started like taking up the cause of like doing an Iron Maiden style Crime Writers On theme. Here's Jeff Brumley's version. Oh, yeah, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right. Well, you got hang on to your hats.
I'm a little unclear what I was thinking when I said I thought that would be a good
I think it's awesome.
But it sounds great.
Now, we also have Graham Dixon, who's another listener, and he also, his version is like, it's the out. So you're going to have like the big finale here.
It does. It sounds like Toby's on a bicycle, maybe a motorcycle. I say a bicycle. He's bicycling down the road get sucked up by an UFO. That's what's in my head right now.
I think he's doing like the devil horns with his fingers. You know,
Take
this
that,
this is like-
aliens!
This has got to be by far the most rocking intro to a book discussion podcast.
probably
in podcast
probably of
land.
all time. Yeah.
Oh my
There's-
God, solo.
Oh yeah.
These guys are talented.
And it's like, of course, there's a big finale.
Okay. Amazing.
Wow.
Damn.
That's incredible.
I know. I feel like we're going to have to amp up the the content that
Yes.
follows that.
You could get some book club recommendations
Yeah.
from my book club, Toby. The Smut Book Club.
Something.
So how about a perfect
That's
transition
awesome.
That's right.
from Iron Maiden right into this podcast about a predator?
Okay, great. Should we get it done?
It's like, oh, could we have planned it worse?
Yeah. All right, let's just start talking about it, shall we?
All right.
Leading off.
A popular teacher was abusing a boy at our school. Maybe abusing a boy. Maybe more than one boy. Lots of maybes. Zero proof. We told authorities what we'd heard. When they didn't act, we raised hell.
In high school, Isolde Raftery and her friend wrote in the school paper about rumors that a popular science teacher had been inappropriate around students. Backlash followed as the community rallied behind Tom Hudson, and a misconduct investigation went nowhere.
If you report this, everything will change, he said. Your life will be separated by the time before you reported it and the time that came after. Be very, very certain this is something you want to do.
For years, she lived with the accusations she ruined a man's life. Now, a seasoned journalist, Raftery revisits the case to answer whether or not Mr. Hudson was a predator, what investigators knew, and where were the adults who should have been protecting the students.
I had always known like this thing had happened and it was there in the back of my memory, but I didn't have a name for it. It was, the Tom Hudson thing. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, wait a minute, I was abused.
From the Peabody-nominated team at KUOW's Focus comes Adults in the Room. Raftery gets classmates and investigators to say now what they wouldn't say then. The podcast explores how Hudson pushed boundaries that were loosely enforced and how his actions have affected his hero-worshipping students all these years later. Spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about significant plot points from Adults in the Room. So if you want to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes for our thumbs up or thumbs down reviews. Now, first off, did anybody else notice besides me that the series that they make at KUOW is called Focus, but that the investigative pages in the high school newspaper was also called Focus? Am I the only one who noticed that?
Yes.
Yes.
I thought that was really fun and cool. And I didn't know maybe Isolde had a role in naming the new thing. Who knows?
No, she only gets employed by things titled Focus.
Oh, that's what it is. All right. So, Laura, at the beginning of this podcast, we hear an insane, not a word I use lightly, story
Insane.
about what this teacher, Mr. Hudson, would do with his outdoorsy club and a misadventure that occurred when they did that. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So he's not even just taking them hiking. He's taking them hiking on a glacier, a 20-mile backcountry hike through the forest onto the Blue Glacier. And they're all like roped together on this. And he's like, a big guy. He's like really tall, and he tells everybody how much he weighs because he weighs like a quarter of a ton or something. So everybody
A third
knows
of a ton.
whatever it was. And he like falls down this like 30-foot crevasse while they're all roped together.
The students lowered their most experienced climber into the crack. He cut off Mr. Hudson's backpack and connected him to a rope. Up top, the students assembled a pulley system to haul Mr. Hudson out, a pulley system he taught them in safety drills.
What the hell are they doing? Like taking high school kids out on a glacier like this with a student. Like we hiked Mount Major with my son's school. That's like a little day hike. It's a few miles. 20 miles is like not a little hike. So right off the bat, though, you're like, okay, so this guy has some lore in the school because for a certain group of students, he's doing things that they think are very cool that they are a part of. But I'm like, in the first 5 minutes, I'm like, there are bad decisions being made in this school.
Yeah. Well, the school culture.
You think?
The school culture is
There
pretty
are bad
wild.
decisions being made in this school.
Honestly, I have a friend who works at a private school, and when she tells me stories about some of the things that like have happened at that school, I'm like, that must be a private school thing. I've heard stories, obviously, from some of the prep schools here in New Hampshire, and it's like, that must be a private school thing. But Toby, this is a public school. I'm not saying, by the way, that it's okay if it's a private school. I don't think it is. But it strikes me more that because this is a public school, it's a little bit more shocking.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, there's just different regulations for public schools than there are for private schools. The whole thing for me is that this guy, Mr. Hudson, the guy weighs 350 pounds and he was doing a 20-mile hike onto a glacier. Like, that guy is supposed to be in awesome shape. But he seemed like the most like extreme symptom of what seemed to be like sort of a systemic issue within this school, because they talk almost in passing at the beginning about how, Garfield was the kind of school where like kids would sleep over at their teachers' houses. I'm like, wait, what? What are you talking about? And so it just, I think they had this sense of themselves as we treat students as human beings and teachers have these close relationships with them or whatever. But, you hear about the story about how their principal basically was sleeping with a student.
Not basically.
And then when it was and then when it was exposed, like they hightail it to freaking Arkansas or somewhere, and he's like blaming her for the whole thing.
So were the other students, by the way, blaming her.
Right.
How about the demonstration?
And so it's like this weird culture.
Everybody walks out, and the chant is what? DJ got a BJ, so what?
Yeah.
You might assume people thought our principal was a creep for sleeping with a student, but you'd be wrong. The student body wanted Dr. Jones reinstated. In a diary entry from this time, I wrote about a school walkout in protest of his removal. Students marched down Alder Street and chanted, "So DJ got a BJ. Who cares? Who cares?"
Toby, you slept over at your English teacher's house, though, from what I understand.
I did. The difference there, which I think is critical, is that was my mom. And I actually...
You didn't have to sing the national anthem.
Yeah, I remember...
I did not. I certainly did not.
I remember being in high school, like a rare occasion when like sometimes a teacher would drive a kid home, like because it was like a whatever, and how weird that felt. Like I remember I was in like the mathletes or whatever, and we had to go practice, and there was no... there was like the football team used the buses, so there was no way to get us there. We just sort of carpooled with the teachers, and then the teachers would just drop us off at home afterwards. And it just felt so weird to be in your teacher's station wagon pulling up at your house.
I was in the 3rd grade and saw my teacher at a department store, and I thought I was in the land of Oz. It was so weird.
It is weird to see your teachers in public.
Yeah, but I mean, you're right. The permissive nature of this high school is just wild. And maybe it was era appropriate. I don't know. I mean, I'm all for educators that are all in on the well-being of their kids. But it's like, it took a genius to see that this was going to be a problem eventually. But it isn't even, it's not even like, oh, well, we didn't know that. We find out through this investigation that, like this guy should have been on the radar because he had other complaints against him. And the fact that he took a boy and a girl and took photos of them skinny dipping, I mean, at what point do the red flags, when are they noticed,
right.
He put the phone on a fucking timer so that he could get over there and so they could all be in the picture. I mean, it's insanity.
Yeah. I really love, I'm just going to tip my hand, I really love this podcast. And the reason I love it, like the only reason it super works for me, I'm not sure it would have worked under any other circumstances, was because of the framing. Because Isolde went to this high school, broke this story, and has been living her whole life wondering what the fuck actually happened, right? And now she's a reporter and she goes back and investigates it. And because she is in the story, she is able to do things that I think another reporter wouldn't be able to do, such as make commentary on the way students felt and talk about what it was like in the hallways. It's not cold narration. It's like, I was there kind of stuff. A huge part of the story, though, Laura, is that she was also a real journalist in high school because they had a real journalism program. I was kind of jealous about that. My school did have a free press and it was a real journalism program, but their paper sounds like it was really intense.
That was no joke, that paper. Like, she had to camp out on the floor of the newspaper classroom to get in because at first the teacher was like, basically like, oh, you were like homecoming queen or whatever she was. Like, you don't really want to be on the paper. And then she's trying to make a name for herself. And I think her first story, like the first line was like, the condom broke on a Saturday. And I'm like, whoa, this is racy for a high school newspaper.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But she talks about like staying there until like 10 o'clock at night and how it was like a legit newsroom. And they were all sort of pretending like doing like their little casual swearing back and forth, like they were in a real newsroom, which they were. But then you hear that they're actually breaking these stories in this newspaper. And they're pursuing a lot more hard news journalism than I see at like our local high school newspapers. So it was a legit thing. So I appreciated that it started there for her. But then you can hear how she's collecting information and records in that whole time since then towards telling this story in its entirety.
Yeah, I agree with you, Rebecca, as far as like the framing and why it sort of elevates this particular story. Because as far as like the only negative consequences from, this incident in the 90s, it all fell on her and her friend, right? The backlash. And they end up, implicitly taking the blame for this guy taking his own life. But what I like about this, in addition to the investigation that they've got going on, is that it's one of those, let's look back at my childhood and take a look at that thing again. So it reminds me of You Didn't See Nothing and Devil in the Ditch, where we had people like, okay, what was that thing that happened when we were young and we didn't know anything more about it? What, what can we find out now? So, and especially like with her, that incident was a humiliation and not a triumph. And so to come back and kind of say, like, all right, we're going to get to the bottom of this once and for all. And so it's not only just that all these other people were wrong about Mr. Hudson, it's like she was wrong about, the way that she felt about it, right? That she carried this with her as like a failure instead of a triumph. Where it is a triumph every time you join us on Patreon.
That's true.
Every time somebody comes on and joins us,
triumphant.
It keeps this podcast going. Patreon.com/Partners in Crime Media.
We're in the business section.
We'll get exclusive content to you, including the Crime Writers on After Show, Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast. Next book that you should be reading, listen into Toby's discussion of This House of Grief, with Toby gives a big thumbs up to. Married with Podcast, our advice podcast, and we've got Something's Off, another podcast with Rebecca and Mel Barrett. If you become a Bricker Scaler, you also get an exclusive podcast, Laura Bricker's Leave It to Bricker, in which Laura solves mysteries, or at least mysteries to her, in her quaint AF town of Exeter, New Hampshire. If you're a Let's Do What We Do level supporter, you get episodes of Crime Writers on early and ad-free. And if you are a deep diver, you get to hear that awesome Iron Maiden themed song live. Actually, they don't play it live when they record, but when Toby does record, you get to join the discussion at the deep dive. Now, another way to support us is at our Amazon storefront, where you can see some of our favorite things. Rebecca, what are this week's Amazon recommendations?
Well, one of them is something I bought for you, Kevin. I bought you a food temperature gun to point inside of our pizza oven or our grill to see if it's like 900 degrees
it's like
or
one
not.
of those laser thermometers, but this one goes up extra high because it gets super hot in the...
Because a bear knocked over and broke our outdoor pizza oven last year. He broke the stone, so I ordered a new stone, and I was like, you know what else I'm going to get? I'm going to get Kevin one of those fancy-ass pizza oven thermometers.
Yeah, because the other one just kind of and
it would just peg up at the
out,
400.
This is useless.
Yes.
Okay, no, that was great, Toby. But
thanks.
Can you tell us what your listener-inspired Toby Ball's deep cut recommendations are?
Yeah, sure. This first one, is clearly necessary, but not something I want to think about a whole lot. But it's the Oh Yuck jetted tub cleaner for jacuzzis, bathtubs, whirlpools. The most effective jetted tub cleaner, septic safe, 4 cleanings per bottle, 16 ounces. And then this one just sounds awesome, and I'd love to know more. It's the new Ototo, which is all in caps for some reason, Sir Peels a Lot Medieval Night Vegetable Peeler. Swivel vegetable peelers for potatoes, fruits, cute gadgets, gifts, potato, veggie, fruit.
Potato, veggie, fruit.
A medieval night vegetable peeler. What do you think that is?
It's probably that. Remember
Maybe
that guy?
It's a guillotine?
Remember that guy in Neighbors who was making those kitchen hatchets?
Oh, yeah.
I bet he makes them. Who knows?
If that guy would make me a custom-made, steel vegetable peeler,
you take it.
That'd be great.
All right.
Yeah, 100%.
You get to see all that stuff when you shop first at Amazon at amazon.com/shop/Crime Writers On. We earn commissions on qualified purchases.
All right, Kevin.
Yeah.
Do we have any Patreon patron saints of the week this week?
Our Patreon patron saints are Dylan Wilbanks and Amanda Butikofer. bless you.
Amanda, Dylan, thank you so much for supporting this podcast. We honestly couldn't make it without your support. We'd have to cancel the whole thing. So folks like you would like to join you on Patreon. Please encourage them to. We can't tell you how much we love you. Kevin, does that end our business section?
Thus ends the business section.
Fade that music out. So, Toby, before the break, we were talking about the framing of the show, sort of this doubt that this adult woman has about her childhood reporting and the light it cast her in. And I thought going into this, wow, this might end up being a complicated story. She could end up having been wrong about this teacher. Nope. What do you think about his unbelievably blatant pattern of grooming that he did with these students?
I don't know, man. I went through high school about 10 years before this, but the stuff that he was having kids do that they were willing to do, and it wasn't even like the idea that you would strip naked. Like you would have a bet with a teacher and whoever lost the bet would strip naked and sing the national anthem in front of the other one while fully erect, apparently.
Yeah.
Like, A, I wouldn't want to do that. B, I don't think I'd want to see any of my teachers doing that. It's just a very odd, like, I don't know.
He had all the power. He had all the power, Toby.
I mean, sort of, but it's not like he's their boss.
Right. But
you know? I mean, the power dynamic's a little bit different in that they've got a lot of power in that they can go and say, look, this is what this teacher did. And then he's in a lot of trouble. So I think he had this cult of personality that was around him, like clearly, and this whole, what was it, post 84 or whatever, that was this outdoors club. And because of that, and because of the success of that, and my sense was that it seemed as though he was probably like doing a lot of sort of test grooming on kids who are in it to see which ones would sort of respond to it and then kind of continue on with them. But the fact that like kids who weren't groomed but had great experiences and their parents were very supportive. I mean, in some ways, like that Glacier thing sounds like one of those outward bound things, but you're doing it in a public school for kids who aren't being sent there by their parents to get straightened out. It's just like, okay, we're going to go on this adventure. You're going to learn survival skills and all this stuff. So, yeah, I mean, it seemed as though he had support amongst the kids who really liked him, had support amongst parents. He had support amongst teachers, like this guy, Mr. Eric, who...
oh, fuck Mr. Eric.
Who's just like, thanks for bringing this to my attention. I'm going to go and talk to Amanda Mann. And then when they publish, it's like, you guys are fired. It's like, what is going on here? So again, the whole dynamic seems so dysfunctional. I mean, there must have been rumors in the school. I mean, I can't imagine there not being rumors in the school about this stuff.
Right. But you were right about the cult of personality part. Yeah. I mean, you're right about the cult of personality part, but like there was a social currency to being around this man. And that is so important to teenagers. Like, and by the way, when people did tell on him, nobody fucking cared.
Yeah.
The parents went to the meeting and were like, my kid almost died and no one cared. When a kid did complain, no one cared. The investigation went nowhere. So I think there's a pattern of kids trying to speak out. It never happens. And then there's this whole thing where you're cool if you're around Mr. Hudson. And if you try to hurt Mr. Hudson, you're not cool anymore. It reminds me of the old coach / gym teacher at the high school our kids went to, who like was very clearly like a bad person, but some of the parents just like loved him, and some of the kids just like loved him. And it's like, what are you doing? So, Laura, what do you think about that? What do you think about Hudson and his behavior and the way he kind of like seemed to do his thing in this school?
Well, like you said, it definitely sounds kind of like that textbook grooming behavior. But it's happening in a time period when the awareness was very different than it is today. The after the fact part, I think, was really interesting, especially with that boy, Jonathan, who was that student who was like volunteered or voluntold what he was going to do, who was like the president of that outdoor club. And kind of talks about like how it was once you were sort of under his influence and you were kind of in his sphere, how difficult it was to get out of that. And how he was like, kind of like, it's the last year that I have to like deal with him and whatever. He's the one who kind of talks about the swimsuit, you know, he's in the shower and Hudson's like, yeah, like, come on, just, you know, take it off. And he's like, I'm going to wear my swim trunks. And he's like, that's not how we shower, Jonathan. And, you know, Jonathan's like, yeah, but this is how I shower because this doesn't feel quite right. So I think you definitely, I think it's very hard in those institutional settings where you have that long history of somebody who has been in that position for a long time, has people that are fans, has supporters, has people that have probably had positive experiences that haven't had these boundary pushing experiences that in hindsight were obviously really out of bounds. And how at that time when we didn't talk about this like we did now, but I think it's very hard to approach that when you're already in so far as he was. Like, how do they tackle that at that time? And the title of this, The Adults in the Room, the kids are the ones that knew something was going on. But when you find out that there was reports long before her mother called and nothing happened, it's kind of like, what personality is able to wield that level of control over an entire population for so long? And that's what we have here.
Kevin, what are your thoughts on Hudson?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems like Hudson was escalating, right? At some point, we heard him, one of the students say that he confessed that he was afraid that he might be gay. And then he makes boys pleasure them. He was pleasuring himself while they were singing the national anthem naked. And then he's in a tent masturbating alongside one of them.
That's so gross.
Right? And we haven't heard that he had laid hands on anybody. And not that that's a slight distinction there. To me, it seems like he was building up to that and trying to do that. But that's all part of the grooming process, right? Is you are trying to see what you can get away with. And certainly, the system here at this school was such that even in whatever 1990s guardrails there were, it definitely seemed like they were rubbing up against these guardrails and going over them. And one of the things that just kind of struck me is was that Mr. Eric, the newspaper editor, said, and he's like, I'll talk to him man to man, and he promised me he won't do that shit again, And again, I don't know how much of this is sort of how naive we were as a society about what is happening in these situations or not.
Toby, Isolde goes back, and we talked about the framing a little bit earlier, but she's really unpacking this thing with time and care. It's almost like she, with her adult skills, she's going back and doing her high school job. What do you think about that? Because this took a lot of time to report, and clearly KUOW invested a lot of her time in it. Do you think that works to go back to your childhood and look again? Does that work for you?
I think it does. It had me thinking a little bit about how in high school, there's these different silos of information and relationships and stuff. So there's stuff that the kids know that the teachers don't know. There's stuff that the teachers know that the kids don't know. There's stuff the administrators know that nobody knows. And then there's a lot of stuff that kind of leaks in between those groups. And it seems like when she was a student, she had this one sort of window on this larger issue that was going on in the school. And it was through this guy, Mr. Hudson. And that's a story in and of itself, obviously. But I think going back and not having sort of these, it's not even really blinders. It's just these different stratifications, basically. And not having that there and being able to sort of see the larger situation in which Mr. Hudson was doing his stuff. I don't know. I thought that was interesting. And I think for her, given what happens with him, he ends up dying by suicide. And you get the sense that some people held her somewhat responsible as being a factor in this happening. And so I think there is, in addition to just this, I'm going to reinvestigate this thing that happened, there's also this sense of, trying to come to terms with something that was kind of laid on you when you were 16 or 17 years old that you couldn't possibly have foreseen. And that, how right was I about this stuff? Were there other factors that led to this? Am I really in some way responsible for this? So I think there's also this sort of personal stake in addition to going back and sort of examining these things that happened in your youth, that I think is just another level of stakes, I guess.
Yeah.
There's stakes on a few different levels. So it's more effective than it has any right to be. Because in some ways it's oh, this seems a little gimmicky. But then when you actually are in it, you're like, no, actually, this makes sense on both a personal and sort of a looking at this thing that happened on both those bases.
Right.
Her situation seems to give her sort of a unique look at this or a unique reason to want to get some kind of resolution.
But Laura, we shouldn't in any way minimize the amount of incredible reporting in this story, right?
Yeah, I think what was fantastic about this is the fact that she had the credibility because people knew her, they went to school with her, and so she tracks down so many of these former students that people wouldn't listen to at that time, including the girl, the former cheerleader who went off with the principal and sort of what happened to her now and how it affected her life. And it seemed like people appreciated that she was reaching out. And so they were willing to be candid in the way that they spoke with her. And then, that boy in the photograph, which was like, who is this boy? Nobody knows who this boy is. Going and reaching out to him, who's almost 50, and finding out his story at the time. He was the one that was in the tent.
The loser would have to stand on a tree stump naked and sing the national anthem at full attention.
So you'd be standing at attention. Like, is the idea, would you be masturbating or would he?
Attention being the euphemism, fully erect.
What happened to him had sort of manifested his own sexual proclivities in his adult life, where something that he was interested in was exhibitionism. And he was like, why is it that I'm like, is this because of what happened when I was young? I don't know. Does it matter? But he said that had been sort of something for him that was therapeutic. But to hear where the people were, to hear how a lot of different people had different feelings about what happened at the time and blamed themselves for things. And then afterwards, all these years later, to find out things didn't happen the way they thought at the time, it was cathartic for people. So it was great reporting to track these people down and give them a voice. And I don't think another reporter would have had the ability to do that because they didn't have that pre-existing relationship and credibility. And so I think it went both ways for her and for the people that she was interviewing.
But another reason, Laura, why the news gathering ends up being so great here is that, unlike a magazine article or a one-off radio report, the weekly nature of the podcast series allows potential sources to hear the product and the direction and the tone and what's going on, and then be more willing to participate. And so, the crowdsourcing nature of some of the true crime series that we've heard, it's like, we're going to do 12 parts on this cold case, and maybe somebody who knows something about the murder will call us, right? And that's, that kind of happened with Serial, and so everyone thinks that's going to happen. And there are times, like in Bear Brook season 1, like things like that happen. And this is a great example of how that can happen, because there were certainly plenty of people that when they were young were afraid to say something or didn't quite understand what they had been through and couldn't put words to it. And now that they are adults, and some of them have processed some of it and some of them haven't, and they see the care that the story, is being handled with, and the things that other people are saying. Right? They get to hear what other sources, people said, they had similar experiences. So, that ends up propelling the news gathering, right? And it ends up creating a permission structure for other people to come forward. And because I think, and I'm trying to remember, they talk a little bit about how the sausage is made, but, you call somebody and you cold call them, you say, I want to talk about this teacher from our past. Your first reaction might be, I'm not going to do that. But then when you hear a couple of these episodes, you realize how it's important, how serious the journalism is, the care with which the different subjects are being treated. You feel comfortable and you feel like, I have a desire to tell this story because it needs to be told. And we need to create the context, especially when it seemed like the official story was this came out and then nothing happened. Nobody cared about it. Nobody looked into it. And we're finally able to hear, no, there was this thing years earlier. And like the investigation that was going on at the time that he died was going places. And this is why sometimes it wasn't going places. And it wasn't that nobody cared, but there was still some systemic failures here that need to be addressed.
And all the victims felt alone, which they don't feel anymore.
Right. Which is, would not be uncommon in the 1990s, right? You can kind of understand some of how, not how it came about, but why some of the reactions are as they were and some of the perceptions are as they were. And 30 years on, we have such a different understanding of these kinds of things. And yeah, like you just like, I can't even imagine a science teacher or a high school teacher thinking, hey, I got a great idea. I'll take a couple of my students camping with me, right? Without it occurring to them the way that would look.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, Laura, one of the things when I do umpire baseball, sometimes the umpire will put his hand on the back of the catcher just to balance themselves and to just make sure they're at the right distance. I will not even touch.
Yeah.
I will not even touch the young player, because no good can come of that, right? And so you just know the things that adults know now that they shouldn't do. It just makes it all the more, I don't want to say easier, but it does like underline very much when somebody is a bad actor.
All right, let's do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, should they check out Adults in the Room podcast series from KUOW, public radio station. Yay. Laura Bricker, thumbs up or thumbs down for Adults in the Room?
Yeah, this is a thumbs up. This was extremely well done. This was a very unique project in that we have somebody that has become a professional journalist and actually going back and re-reporting on something that they reported when they were a high school journalist and actually were legitimate, doing legitimate stories in high school. And I think the dynamic between our host and the co-host, who were best friends in high school, and the co-host is now an attorney, the two of them going back to re-examining something that happened at their high school and find out what really happened, because they've always blamed themselves for something for many years. And, you know, it's like when you go back to that place you grew up and you're like, boy, that house looks so much smaller than I remember it. Things are so different. Your perception changes. And I think having a reporting team that had existing relationships with peers at the time that are now adults really enabled them to go deep on this, tell the whole story. And really, I haven't heard the last episode yet, but I feel like they've landed the plane. They've told the whole story. They've made the picture complete. And I think it was just really interesting. It was really well done. I looked forward to each episode. And I think it's one of those stories that shows how much our awareness of what's okay and not okay has changed. And I think this was important to tell for not only these hosts, but the other people involved who finally got to have a voice in the way that they were in this podcast. So big thumbs up.
Toby Ball, thumbs up or thumbs down for Adults in the Room?
Yeah, what she said. Thumbs up.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
All right. Thumbs up.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't have a whole lot to add to that. I just, coming into it with the idea that somebody goes back and reinvestigates something that happened at their high school, you can see where it could go gimmicky, but it's not, it totally works. So yeah, other than that, all the stuff Laura said, big thumbs up.
All right. Kevin Flynn.
Yeah, I'm also big thumbs up on this. The framing device is great. As you say, yeah, let's go back and set the record straight on something. Some of the best true crime series have to do with sort of the personal angle of going back and trying to figure out what happened, the setting the record straight about something. Mentioned them in the main review, something like Devil in the Ditch or You Didn't See Nothing. That's why this, it sets itself apart as a story about, was there a predator in the school back in the day? That might seem somewhat conventional in this genre, but the fact that it's set up as it is and that you have this particular connection to the journalist, I think is great. And I also think that it's a good example here of the advantage of podcast journalism, of rolling out a story week to week, that when it works to the advantage of the news gathering, because I would guess that as they hit record on episode 1, they were not completely aware of everything that they would have by the time they finished the final episode. That it was a living document. It was a living investigation. And for all of those reasons, it makes the story more powerful, and it makes it more valuable to the contributors who tell their story and the other people involved. What happened back then? Do we finally find out? I think so. I think that there is a satisfying answer here to a very unsatisfying situation. So for me, this is a recommendation to go listen. Thumbs up.
Yeah, this is a huge thumbs up for me. And not just because it was made at a public radio station and I root for those podcasts a lot. First of all, I do give credit to the editorial leads there for saying yes to this story, because there is an instinct in a lot of newsrooms to be like, you can't be part of the story you're telling. And that's like completely thrown out the window here. And obviously Isolde is a great journalist, so they had a lot of trust in her. And I think that that's great. What I want to say about this that hasn't been said yet, I think, is that what makes this work isn't just that she was there, it's that she was a journalist when she was there. And there's sort of like it's like a dream we all have with what we know now. What could we go back and live this part of our lives again, or do it differently, or have a different result? And so there's like an element there where you're like, hot damn, this is incredible. This is like something I wish I could do with some aspect of my life, right? And so there's that is incredibly satisfying. The bravery of the sources in this podcast really blows my mind. It reminds me of the 13th Step podcast that my outlet made a few years ago, where, again, rolling it out week to week, doing some pre-reporting on this. We didn't roll it out week to week, but we had a pre-report on it that made a lot of people come forward. Same thing. It does work. But then also, I think the candor with which they speak to her has a lot to do with the fact that they went to high school together. And there is a trust and there is a shared experience. So I don't know if Isolde herself could recreate something that's this special. She probably can, but it would be completely different than this, because what makes this work is that it's her, and that she was a journalist and that she still is a journalist. I think this podcast is truly excellent. It is the first thing I've heard this year where I'm completely like gobsmacked and will tell people outside of this to listen to it, and we'll talk about it. It sounds very different from other things that I've heard, and I absolutely love it. I think it's blockbuster, and it definitely will be in my top 10 for the year. That's going to do it for us, but before we go, Laura Bricker, do we have a cat of the week this week?
This cat of the week comes to us from Toby Ball, because Toby, like if I was in any other place, I'm always on the hunt for the cats that need help. And I've been known to pat feral cats and diseased cats on the street, much to my son and everyone else's dismay.
You look diseased. Can I pet you?
I know. Oh God, it's a situation. Like,
can I touch
like,
your
please.
Open sore, kitty? Come here.
So Toby has been finding out about the cats in Valencia, and he sent me a nice kitty cat that looks a lot like Frankie, the municipal parking lot attendant cat here in Quain AF Exeter. And this cat is Blanca. I was living in a car park for 8 years and was finally captured by some nice people who gave me vet care and a safe place to call home, where I laze around in the sunshine with other misfit cats. Che Gats? Is that how I say that, Toby?
I think so.
They work with street cats in Valencia, Spain, to humanely trap, neuter, release, and care with food. So trap, neuter, release. They have about 150 cats living happy lives, and they're seeking donations. Toby, tell us how you found out about this group.
I actually met a woman who's one of the women who runs the group. And I don't know how cats came up, but they did. And I think she actually has 5 cats. But we were actually walking around the old part of the city, and she was showing like there's these empty lots, I guess, in Valencia that become like these cat sanctuaries, so that there's like doors that get locked and stuff. And I think there's like a little door cats can come and go from, but essentially the cats like hang out in there. But I think there's now pressure from the city government to build on those lots because there's like a housing shortage or whatever. So I think they're trying to figure out what's going to happen then. But anyway, it's a cool thing. There is a history in Valencia of trying to tend to the stray animals in the city. And these cat sanctuaries are part of that.
Ese gato es muy elegante.
Yes.
Elegante. Yes. Very, very much so. Very much so. So I think they've got like a GoFundMe. So I'll post that somewhere, or we can post that somewhere.
And if you want to help GoFund us, you can go in our merch store at our website and buy a shirt with that phrase on it, right?
Tu gato es elegante.
Or a mug.
T-shirt, mug.
Tote bag,
notebook, button,
mouse pad. All right, Laura
baby
Bricker,
onesie,
if folks want to reach out to you with their nominees for their pets or any other animal
pillow,
to be cat of the week, how can they find you online?
Oh my God. You can find me at Laura Bricker on Blue Sky and Instagram, which is where I also found the story about the woman who got emergency dental care for a squirrel recently in California.
Nice.
So.
What about you, Toby? How can you be found?
I don't have anything like squirrels. On my Instagram, I do have the moment when Sweden qualified to the final round of the World Cup playoffs. On Instagram, it's at TobyBall603, and Blue Sky is at TobyBallNH.
Kevin Flynn.
Yeah, I'm a Kevin P. Flynn.
You can follow me everywhere at Reb Lavoie. Follow the show everywhere at Crime Writers On. I encourage you, though, to join our incredible Facebook group. It is rad there. Everyone is wonderful. Get episodes early and ad-free and everything else we make at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia. Our theme song was composed and performed by Ty Gibbons, and our editor is the terrific Livy Burdett. The EP of this show is Kevin. This show was recorded in the Caitlin Rogers Project Studio, also known as Studio C, the closet in our New Hampshire basement, where we also get yelled at by a demanding high school newspaper advisor who takes this shit way too seriously. On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later.
Our Patreon patron saints are Dylan Wilbanks and Amanda Butikofer. Bless you.
I thought you were going to say Buttafuoco, and that was like...
Yeah.
But if you
That was a real throwback.
Spoiler alert, Joey's a fan, as it turns out.
That would be...
That all happened next to my high school, by the way.
I'm sure it did.
Speaking about a
did you
progressive high
see that
school?
Saturday Night Live thing where it was Masterpiece Theater presents House of Buttafuoco?
No, but I'm going to watch it now.
No.
All right.
Yeah, Joey's Garage was next door to my high school.
Partners in Crime Media.